Well, I'm Jen Wicken, CEO of and one of the co-founders at Impact Public Schools. Really excited this afternoon to be with you to talk about what it takes to build a transitional kindergarten program. Because this is so new to our state, I'm by no means expert, but we have spent the last year and a half building a TK program at Impact. And we're really excited to bring it to Impact Public Schools across our schools. A little about me, and then I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and what you hope to learn today. I was raised in Washington and have been a teacher, a principal, a central office leader in both districts and in charters. And have spent some time in the Oakland area founding charter networks, and came back and was a leader in the Seattle Public School District, leading principal and assistant principal professional development, and was most recently the chief regional officer of Summit Public Schools in Washington State, and now am building Impact Public Schools, which I'm going to share more about now. Would love to hear a little bit more about you all, though. Thanks so much for those who came off, are on camera. It just helps to see your faces. Angie and Sandra, I'd love to hear more about like what you're hoping to learn today. And part of what we want to do in this moment is to start to create like a community of practice around those who are interested in either learning more about TK or building TK programs in their districts or charters. Andy, do you mind sharing a little bit more about what you hope to learn?
Sure. So I'm curious to learn about transitional kindergarten. I've barely heard about it until this year. So I have in the Colville School District community, I have a Head Start program, and then the Colville District has put in a transitional kindergarten classroom. And so I really want to know how to work better to make sure that all the kids that need preschool are served, but it doesn't take away from my Head Start program. I mean, we've been in this community for 50 plus years. And so just want to learn more about the program and how it might impact my work.
Angie, that's so helpful, because I do think like part of what we're going to talk about today is like how do we focus on the full ecosystem, that like partners who already exist who are serving in the early learning capacity, and how do we work together to support all kids and just build on resources and instead of taking away from others. So thank you for raising that, and I look forward to your input throughout, but especially during that portion. Sandra, how about you?
Well, again, I'm the director for the ESD Early Learning Programs, and we do provide ECAP services in the Tri-County area as well as Lincoln County. And in my role, in my other hat, as I shift to the state work that we do, and in association with the larger picture of the state initiatives and the service agreements we have with OSPI, one of our roles as ESDs is to help our school districts understand transitional kindergarten, and also to be that liaison to make sure that we are not supplanting, so that, again, like you said, Jen, the whole ecosystem and how we can utilize the tools that OSPI has put forward in terms of a readiness checklist, also kind of a resource guide in terms of how we could do some joint recruitment so that we're not, supplanting children, and that we're working together to make sure all of the needs are met. And specifically with the rural schools, my role is to help them kind of look at too, what is the population, in their districts in terms of what's the need, who are currently being served, who are not currently being served. Is there a real population for TK, or is it, to the point where we have such a low number of children that they're serving that really TK is probably not going to be sustainable. So I think that's pretty much my role in both the ECAP world, similar to Angie in terms of wanting to make sure that we're serving all of the children and meeting their needs, but also in a state role to help roll out TK in a comprehensive way.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you so much. You both are going to bring such great expertise to this conversation. And then Kathy, do you want to share, or Glenn, or let's see who else is on here? Carolyn.
No, other than just to support strongly that notion of building the ecosystem, so that the bottom line notion is that we have all students receiving services in an equitable manner. And so there are lots of kids who aren't being covered by these other programs. And how do we make sure that we provide services to those children? That's the bottom line. Not, again, there's no notion of taking away or any of that. The notion is serve all kids. Who's not being served? How can we do that? And this might be it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, Kathy. Welcome, Carolyn. I would love to know where you're from and what you hope to learn today.
So I'm also from Northeast Washington, and I only operate an early Head Start home visiting program. Have operated it for almost 25 years now. And 19 out of about 22 of our staff all live and work in that Tri-County area, kind of across the whole 6,000 square mile area. And I think my big concern is sustainability, because I want to be sure that we don't accidentally have an unintended consequence of not being able to sustain the programs that exist with the populations up there, so that we gain new things but lose other things. So it's mostly, I just want to become a little bit more informed and see if there is any sort of role, since this is, after the kids leave our program, but just to understand if there is a role that we can play to be helpful in the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. And then how about Candace Harris? You're on. Would you like to introduce yourself and share what you hope to learn today?
Yeah, I'm the director here at Valley Early Learning Center at the Valley School. We have a licensed childcare that runs all year long. We have ECAP Spots Rural Resources as our contractor. And I'm just here for more information. We've been looking at, we would have started our transitional kindergarten program this year, but with COVID, I didn't have enough children to do it. I'm just here for information.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today. Anyone else, would you like to jump in and share who you are and what you hope to learn?
Yeah, I'm Glenn from Mossy Rock Schools, and we don't have a transitional kindergarten program here. And just curious to hear what you guys have to offer. I've actually been tuning in for the last couple of days to sessions in the background as I multitask at my computer here. So just want to listen in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn, for being here. Great. I'm going to launch us in. It looks like also Paul Clark is on. Would you like to? Hi, Paul. Do you want to share your role and what you hope to learn today?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a self-proclaimed guru. My name is Paul Clark. I'm superintendent high school principal at Colton School District, and we're interested in transitional K in order to increase programming offerings for our little kids while collecting apportionment, just strengthening program across the board. So that's who I am and where I'm at.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Paul. I know it's a busy time. Awesome. So I'm going to dive right into sharing a little bit about Impact Public Schools. If you've heard this already from one of our other sessions, please feel free to go off camera and do what you need to do, and then I'll call you back in to re-engage. But in terms of like our agenda today, I am going to share our approach to building over the last year and a half a TK program. And then we're going to talk through some of the like common questions and challenges that we were faced with, that I think some of you might be faced with as well. And then provide opportunities for us to discuss what this looks like to build this around the state. So we are Impact Public Schools, first homegrown charter network of public charter schools in Washington State. Many of us have worked in district systems and charter systems where majority from Washington. Our mission is entirely focused on Washington State. We have our school in Tukwila, our first school, opened in 2018, and we're now serving students all the way through 4th grade. We recently opened Impact Salish C Elementary in South Seattle, and Impact Commencement Bay Elementary is opening in Tacoma next fall, and our Renton School opening the following fall. This will complete a region of 4 schools. We do have aspirations of one day working with partners to build new schools in central and eastern Washington, but that's pretty far out. Our vision is to work with partners like yourself who believe in students and what all students are capable of. And we know that there's a growing opportunity gap in our state. We want to lock arms with district partners, nonprofit leaders, university partners to eliminate that gap because we believe that one day Washington will boast a public education system that is connected, just, and vibrant. We have a 2-part mission. The first is we prepare a diverse student population to succeed in college and impact communities as the next generation of equity-driven, innovative leaders. We do that through the creation of new small schools. We also have a 2nd-part mission, which is making a broader impact on public education across Washington State by advocating for policies that close the opportunity gap and helping to spread best practices with districts and charters and that provide all students their right to a high-quality education. We see the work that we're doing today and our ongoing work with the Rural Alliance really aligned to that 2nd-part mission. Our elementary school design is quite innovative. We actually traveled around the country before our first school opened for a year, really observing and being in some of the highest performing elementary schools in the country and capturing their best practices to design impact. You'll see our results, but we're actually in the top 5% of reading growth. So one of the highest performing charter schools in the nation because our students are reading so quickly. Our school design is really rooted in these 3 principles. The first is just the power of relationships. We believe in secure attachments. One example of this in our community is the mentorship relationship. Every child has an adult mentor who is the liaison between the family and the school. This relationship was really important when we moved to online learning. And because it just maintained that connection to the school. We also believe in really empowering students and developing their agency. Every child works at their just right level and has a personalized pathway in our system. And we ultimately believe that the goal of public education is actually liberation. And the way to get there is the development of students' deeper learning skills through meaningful project-based learning. You can see that this is our portrait of an impact graduate. So I'll let you read the words around this. Our community developed this together, but this is what we hope all impact graduates leave us with. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind coming off chat and naming 1 or 2 things you notice about these words. Or coming off mute, if you don't mind. What do you notice?
I notice kind and strong sense of self.
Thank you. Yep. Like not just about the academics, but also those social emotional learning skills.
I think also loves learning, strong positive relationships with teachers and peers, because I think that's where it actually begins.
Love it. Yeah, maintaining that curiosity that we know all students are born with. Thank you. We serve, like many of you, a diverse student population. Ours might be a bit different because we have many different languages spoken in our school. We have 11 languages. Our top most prominent language is Amharic. We are 83% students of color. And this year, actually, that number is 70% low income. These are our results. So our students did place 77% of the scholars met their growth target. This is on the NWEA nationally normed reference assessment, and 87% met their growth target in math. And these are what placed us in the top 5% of the highest performing charter schools nationally. Our results last year were on track to be stronger, but then COVID hit, and you know what happened there. We already had a session on assessment during COVID. If you're curious about how we're doing with that, please let us know and we can send you the recorded session on that section. What makes Impact different? We actually have 4 core components of our innovative elementary model. It's rooted in social emotional learning. We provide that individualized instruction for students every single day. We believe in project-based learning, and all 3 of those core components are held together by what we call a culture of positivity or joy. Social emotional learning is our foundation. Every day begins with 30 minutes of dedicated SEL time in mentor groups. We, during that time, set goals with students starting in kindergarten. We practice mindfulness, which we call the True North. We do daily check-ins, and we end each week in what we call community circle. Individualized instruction, every student receives a Just Right reading and math group every single day. And we also use adaptive software to help support students at their Just Right level. And then project-based learning, all students, even our early learners, are engaged in meaningful, rich projects that end in student products that get showcased to community audiences. And we believe in, while we hold high expectations for scholars, also infusing tons of joy with positive narration, chants and songs, and lots of family communication. So I'm going to move us on from the background of Impact to talking specifically about TK. This is our why, and you can see I've offered some questions in the blue box on several of these slides. Please feel free to, instead of chatting it, let's just come off mute and share, because it's hard for me to read the chat and present. And I know several of you have a lot of experience here too, so I'd love to just hear from you. We were intending to open the TK this fall, and this Washington State Charter School Commission has postponed the official approval of a TK program. So we had spent a year and a half designing the TK program. We have applied many of the TK principles to serving some of our early entry K students. So I'm excited to share those with you. And I'm going to share with you all that we have done and are doing to build the program. We have some really sharp early learning leaders on our team that we are really driving a lot of this work. We launched our first school, like I said, in 2018, and our big why for pushing for TK in all of our schools is our fall data showed that our kindergarten and first grade students, so our first school opened with K and first grade students, they entered significantly behind their national peers. So our first graders were significantly behind where other first graders were in the country. And it was clear that the majority of them did not have access to early learning programs. I know that's not the case across our state and that it's different by region, but where we're located, there is a real need. For many, we know that for many of our families, they cannot afford high quality learning options. And for for those that are providing subsidies, there's in our area limited supply. And there seems to be high demand based on what we're hearing from families for TK, high quality TK that is free and aligned to a K-5 system. So we see this as just like a critical component to us meeting mission, which again is to eliminate the opportunity gap in Washington. For those who are in districts, what do you see, or even if you're not, like, what do you think is the why, either your why or the state's why around transitional kindergarten?
Well, I'll jump in, Jen. For the
Rural Alliance, I think it's partly the same as yours. There's a limited supply of high quality early learning options. That is every.
Kathy, I think you went on mute, but I think it was your audio is a bit, yeah, try again, maybe.
I was just going to say, I think for the Rural Alliance, it's somewhat similar to yours, that there's a limited supply of high-quality learning options. There are high-quality learning options, but they're not there for every child who needs them in rural and remote areas. And so
that is a big why for the Rural Alliance, to mitigate that opportunity gap for these students.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Yeah.
I would also say, this is Sandra. I'll bring myself onto the video. You know, again, I think that there are families in our communities that don't qualify for some of the programs that are currently existing. And with the districts that I've worked with, you know, our mission and our why is we want to serve all children. And in many of our ECAP programs, that's why we run a mixed option for either, you know, a community-based preschool program, which again, the district then bears the burden of the cost, along with an ECAP or a Head Start program. So, you know, I think that in the district's interest, obviously having a TK program that is financially viable would be great, but the problem sometimes in more of our rural programs is that we just simply don't have enough children. But if we could reach more children, I mean, obviously there may be more out there, we don't know. But if we could reach those families, then, you know, it could be financially sustainable to hire a certificated teacher and make sure that, you know, that they're working in collaboration with the preschool program and the ECAP program. Yeah. So I think it's, again, the why is all children. And we want to make sure that that's available and sustainable.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Is it Sandra or Sandra?
Sandra.
Sandra. Okay, great. I'm excited to talk with you offline because I think you're speaking my language. I feel like we need to have a better system that where we move like from collaboration of all early learning services to the K-12 system. And I see TK as like a way to do that if we do it well with partners.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm curious to just talk more with you about that.
Perfect, I'd love to.
Awesome. Yeah, so before we even set out to build a TK model, we really looked at the research. I will say the research is mixed. So you've probably seen a lot of the research too, but the research is very clear with that TK programs or high quality pre-K programs are really great at closing the opportunity gap when they're intentionally designed and there's strong PD. But it's mixed. It doesn't mean that all pre-K or TK programs are excellent just because it's really about the quality of those programs. So you can see that these 4 data points are really the drivers for us. Like low-income children in pre-K programs are more likely to enter K on par with affluent classmates. Low income and I don't love this term, but quote unquote disadvantaged students make the most gains in pre-K programs, which is really the intent of TK. As you know, it's to serve students who are not on track to enter kindergarten. Children who attend early learning programs are less likely to be placed in special education as compared to peers who do not attend. Children who attend early learning programs are less likely to be retained and more likely to graduate from high school as compared to peers who did not attend. And ELL students in pre-K see huge benefits in language acquisition. Again, mixed, but when you look at quality programs, the data is really clear. We spent some time as a community building our philosophy for TK, and this is what we have so far. The Impact TK program is designed to assist students who need extra support before entering K with SEL skills, language skills, pre-math, and pre-reading skills. So it is different than just a typical pre-K program. It's intended to be for students who are not on track to be successful in K. Development of all children, particularly children between the ages of 0 to 5, can vary wildly. And TK is intended to be a 1-year school readiness and development boost. I know some districts are looking at doing or are providing TK for 6 months starting in December or January. Our model is a full year. Impact will carefully track growth towards K readiness, but understands that where students end the year in TK will vary wildly based on individual development. And we actually see that as totally okay, which is really different from the rest of our grade level standards. And I'll share more about that as we go. How does this philosophy, is this similar or different from what you are working on either in your districts or ESDs?
Well, this is Kathy. I love that you're okay with wildly varied places where kids are, and I'm looking forward to hear more about that. Because we, as you well know, there are kindergarten standards that we test for, and we want kids to be in a certain spot. And you're saying we take you where you're at, and we will build you from that.
Exactly.
Love that.
Thanks, Kathy.
I see this aligning with our perspective, our philosophy here in Colton.
Okay, cool. And Paul, remind me, you have a TK program or you're building one right now?
We'd like to be in the second camp. I'd say we're optimistically there in 18 months or so. I don't know.
Okay, cool. I'd also like to chat more with you about that. That'd be interesting. And are you thinking about a pilot next year? Is that the...
Well, we also have facilities issues that come into play. So it depends on what I hear from our architect in the next 2 weeks about something we've been working on for 9 months. But yeah, potentially a pilot. Probably about 18 months is the soonest we could do it, is my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so many unknowns right now, right?
Yeah.
I feel you. Okay. So yeah, I think we've already covered this. I just wanted to get a sense of where you are with TK, but I understand where most of you are. This next slide, I think, has already been brought up by Sandra and others. Just like the importance, and Angie, thanks for raising it, like the importance of partnering with the ecosystem. That TK, while TK is new to the state, early learning programs certainly are not. And there are a lot of great early learning programs around the state and tons we can learn from. And we certainly do not want a new program with good intentions to supplant something that's already excellent for families. So we, here are like our 5 driving, I'd say like driving beliefs around this. We feel it's imperative to ensure that families are aware of all of their early learning options. While Impact will be one of those options, or is one of those options, we are not the only one. And in fact, we might not be the best one for each family and child. I think we should be really clear with families about what we are and what we're not, and really make sure they understand the depth of their other choices. Parent choice is just, for me, like a personal belief. Like, I think it's one of the reasons why I'm in this work. So I would never want them not to know their full set of choices. Second is to work to establish coordinated enrollment across early learning programs. Like, and the K-12 system. This is a bit of like a dream, which is why I want to talk to Sandra. I think that we can do this. Like, there is no reason why we wouldn't coordinate with our early learning providers and our K-12 systems. And TK is a bridge for us to do that. And it's a moment where we could do that better than we've done historically. So we are really working with our partners in the area to start those conversations. And there seems to be interest on the early learning side to do that. The third is work with partners, develop an outreach plan to connect with new families. So sort of to the point Sandra raised already, there might be other families looking for these options and we just don't know where they are. We want to make sure that every single family in the area knows their full set of options. And that takes, outreach, not just them coming to us, but us going to them. So we have developed an outreach plan where we're actually going to each of the early learning providers, and some of them are having us meet with families or table outside their communities so that families are aware of impact as a choice here. Through that, we're developing a partner bank to track communication and progress and sharing that with partners. So it's like a shared document. So we're working to support the families in our area all together. And then one thing we're really excited about right now is this idea of creating learner profiles with our early learning partners to assist with a smoother transition from early learning to the K-12 system. Right now, for those who run K-12 schools, we know that the child's history exists in a cumulative file, which is to me quite sad. It's very much, it's just, it's not personal information about the child. It's not always asset-based. So oftentimes it has a lot of discipline records in it. It's very limited. It doesn't tell the story of a child or their family. We are interested in working with early learning partners to create learner profiles, which in our vision will be electronic, that share the story of a child and their family. Like, what does this child love? What are they passionate about? What are they scared of? What's the family like? What's the history of this family? And how do they like to be communicated with? So that when a child leaves early learning and comes to K-12, there's a seamless transition and the child feels known and seen and loved right away instead of being plopped into a system that's disconnected. So I'm going to pause there and just say, what do you think about that? What resonates? What questions, concerns come up for you?
Jen, I'd just like to say that's exactly on par with our thinking in terms of just that partnering. And I will say that we have kind of stuck our toes in that water with one of our districts specifically that is participating in with us in the P3 inclusion program. And in order to kind of bridge the gap between Tribal Head Start and the K-12 system, we've really come together to look at how can we make that transition smoother and really concentrate specifically on the social and emotional piece. And so that's one of the goals that the district has, is to create a CUME file that would be something more useful for not only kindergarten teachers, but also through the 3rd grade, where we were looking at social emotional development specifically, but also using a transition form that encapsulated not only the academic pieces, but also the anecdotal and the more social emotional pieces that were important. So I completely agree with that would be a wonderful endeavor if we could do it across the board.
Awesome. Thank you. Please keep me posted on that work. I'm so curious about it. Yeah.
And so this is Carolyn, and I love this as well. The one thing that there's a certain subtlety that I would like to offer up on question number 1 is if we have a system that is driven entirely by parent choice, one of the things that we do risk is when you have a Head Start or an early Head Start program that are bringing in federal dollars. And those federal dollars require enrollment of a certain specific population. It's supposed to be the neediest of the needy. It's supposed to be, low income under the federal poverty system. You risk having parents make a choice to move to a different system and the area not realizing that it actually puts that federal funding at risk. You know, you could lose that federal support there. And right now, I think all of us know there's not enough resources for all of the kids as it is. So one thing I would just offer up is, in partnering with people in your community, maybe talking about what the various eligibility criteria are and trying to, I don't know, I think it would have to be an interagency sort of agreement that is really looking to assure that you're focusing on children that are not eligible for the services that already exist, so that it doesn't just, you know, inadvertently, accidentally put that funding in those programs at risk. So the way that it's rolling out with each school district in the state going through this process, you guys are being very thoughtful. I mean, you're thinking about this very systematically. That's just one subtlety that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, no, Carolyn, I really appreciate that flag and just like your honesty. It seems like there should be like a bullet before point 1, which is like, first do a needs assessment to see like, is this needed and in your community? And if it's not, like if there isn't high demand or long wait lists, or then why are we offering it? Yeah.
Well, and actually what I'm saying, I want to be sure it's not quite that. What it really is like, I'll give you an example. There's extreme pressure to be constantly enrolled in Head Start and early Head Start programs. And I can speak to this a little bit because I'm not in I'm not involved with a that's transitional kindergarten or anything like that. But like, I think an ideal system would be something where it's clear that there's a track where the first point of entry is to see whether you're income eligible for a program. And if you're not income eligible for a program, or if that program's full, then move on to a transitional kindergarten. Without that, I think that there could end up being uninformed communities.
Yeah, or like unintended consequences. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's just all. And, you know, we aren't in every community. And I think that's the really hard thing, is that Head Starts and early Head Starts aren't in every community.
Yeah.
And so they can be missed in the process. So,
Yeah.
and we have a responsibility certainly to be reaching out to school districts. Absolutely. But this is so new and it's happened so fast that there's gaps.
Well, yeah, and it's happened so fast without this dialogue. So I know that we're only, 10 of us on here today, but this dialogue I'm learning, and it's so important to get people together to raise these challenges.
Well, and I really honor the way that you've opened up to this and what you're thinking about with this. And it's just, I feel like that's about my only little message here. More is better, but let's be cautious not to accidentally undermine a resource we're not going to get back in the community. Like in our area, we've got $2 million grant. We've had it for over 20 years. If that $2 million accidentally gets lost through completely unintentional, consequences, is the state going to come in with $2 million? That's a huge amount. And that's only one little part of the state.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thank you so much for all your thoughtful work here on this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
And Jen, I would just like to add too that, not only are there, like Carolyn had said, for Head Start, there's income guidelines and the federal poverty guidelines. And with ECAP, because ECAP has a school district pathway for school districts to become or subcontract or become a provider of ECAP services, I think there's also a need for us to have a conversation about how those eligibility guidelines can shift, and what are the other caveats in enrollment. As the last couple of years, the legislature has expanded the enrollment criteria or eligibility criteria for ECAP so that we can meet the needs of those families that fall just outside of that federal poverty index. So those are expanding so that we can obviously provide access to more families that are obviously not meeting the federal poverty guideline, but they still are in poverty. And we need to recognize that there's so few families sometimes in those rural programs that we don't want to leave anybody out. And so I think that's a conversation too, and part of this overall discussion that, again, I am truly grateful that you're opening up to and bringing forward, because I think there are many facets to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra, for that. All good points about the ecosystem and like holding this idea of like we're all in this together in service of our collective community, our collective kids. Yeah, so moving on to these are some details that I thought might be helpful, especially for like Paul or others who are considering TK in the future. Because OSPI considers TK to be a program of K, which honestly took us a minute to get our head wrapped around what that actually meant. The state funding for TK does mirror that of K. Most federal funding is consistent with that of K as well. The one exception is Title I, which took us too long to dig to find this, so I'm just sharing it explicitly now. Which is for us budgeted at $354 per student, which is only provided to ages 5 to 17, so it doesn't apply to a 4-year-old. So in a small system like Impacts, this has, not a huge impact, but it's definitely something we have to plan for. In a larger system, obviously that could be a decent size hit that would need to be planned for. TK for us is expensive program to run. It's actually, I think there's a perception by some that adding TK actually brings resources into the district or organization. It's to do it well, it's actually quite expensive. And the reason why is to do it well, we believe you need smaller class sizes. So our class sizes are 24 to 2, so 1 lead teacher and a teacher fellow. Also, TK requires credentialed teachers, so that we feel, obviously are paid on the teacher pay scale. So it ends up being an expensive program to run, but obviously really mission aligned to get students entering a kindergarten on track. So any questions or thoughts there? Paul, I'm curious how you guys are thinking about this.
We're a place like many that doesn't like change because it's different. And so it's taken us some time to kind of plant the seed of this may be a good idea to increase offerings for our younger students and have them start school at a better spot, thus continuing that. I don't have a lot of brilliance on really where we're at, but our board is becoming more willing to look at this, and my staff is becoming more willing to look at this. My staff in my office primarily that takes care of money. So we'll see. For us, it's a win-win. We also have a daycare for what it's worth. We're a small school district with a daycare as well. So I could see us putting this in a facility next to our school, putting what we've had as preschool childcare out there and putting transitional K into our building, thus using instructional space for it. But there are certainly a lot of factors. We got to look at the birth dates and who we can get in, when, or whatever else. We're kind of at the start of it, hoping to do something as cool as many of y'all are already doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so one of the things that we've really looked at is in line with the research, not all pre-K or TK programs are created equal. To get gap closing results eventually with students in the K-12 system, there are key things that we must have to create a high quality TK system. And one of those is not lowering our expectation on who's serving them. So that might sound obvious, but I think sometimes when we add new programs, we're like, oh, so-and-so can do that, so-and-so can do that. I think offering a TK program is like offering something that's very, very different, and can't say that enough. Like, it is not, these people need to have early childhood backgrounds. They need to know how to work well with 4-year-olds, which is different from working with a 5-year-old. And so for us, we spent a lot of time building our team to prepare for this. We brought on Abby Sedano, who, if you're interested in more collaboration around TK, I'd like to bring her into the next dialogue. She is a former leader, systems leader and teacher of TK programs, and now is our CAO, and is the brains behind our TK model. So if you want to go on more of like a curriculum exploration, she would be a great person to lead us down that path. We specifically hired a principal who had led in early learning before. She has, Ms. Ellis, has actually led the implementation of our curriculum that we're using called Tools of the Mind. So she's leading on building that out right now for TK when it launches in the fall. And then we brought on founding teachers that know how to teach in an early learning environment. Specifically ensuring that they are endorsed in early childhood education, and making sure that there's enough special education background there to support the needs that may be in the classroom. So I'm just opening up. How are you all thinking about like staffing of even just the TK planning, like who's designing it right now?
I'm going to call Sandra.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, actually, that is spot on. I think that's one of the hardest things, is to find, staff that are endorsed in early childhood, or that have some, that are steeped in early childhood, as well as some of the special education pieces. And I think in looking at that ecosystem as an example, we would really, if there are other programs involved, really love that partnership, because obviously our early learning staff, birth to 3rd grade, really have a need to be aligned, and to look at that as a system and not just compartmentalize the early childhood piece versus the K-12 piece. We need to look at it as a whole continuum of services, because if we look at even WAKIDS data from the kindergarten on up, it really has an impact on those 3rd grade Smarter Balance assessments, and there's a deep correlation between those data points. And so I think we need to kind of look at that in terms of what can we do to prepare children with staff who have that expertise from birth all the way through 3rd grade. And again, that's my dream, but I would really, really hope that we were working together as a team under professional development, under curriculum and assessment, anti-bias assessment, all of those pieces that need to be in place for a really high quality program. And I think, looking to your early learning providers, they have that expertise. They've been doing this for some time. So districts can really call upon those folks to help with that, to create that system.
Yeah, love that. Because I think like now that TK is a program of K, there could be a path where we just put any elementary teacher leading the TK class. But I think that is not the right approach here. We really need teachers and leaders who know early childhood education.
And I think just a caveat too, and maybe one of those unintentional consequences, is that many of our early learning programs do have certificated staff on their early learning, either lead teachers, coordinators, and we would hate if a district were to engage in a TK program or planning that they were to kind of, the old word poach from their early learning providers, because again, that's one of those unintentional consequences that we want to really stay away from. And I think if we did some joint planning around that, maybe that would alleviate that potential, risk.
I
So
love that, like intentional
Yeah.
planning around the pipeline.
The big barrier, and so this has been on Valley School District. We have one of the largest early learning centers in Stevens County. And the big barrier for us is most of the superintendents, I don't know how many are on right now. I saw Paul, but our enrollment we were ready to, we had a TK position posted and we were not able to pull it off because of enrollment numbers to start this year, and we shifted staffing around. I think when our thought process with TK was really to partner with our special ed director and then our VLC, our early learning director, principal, to get somebody in there that could really focus on students with special needs. And so if you get a certificated staff member that has special ed endorsement, and I know that's hard that's a tough
unicorn.
But if you're able to do that, it really helps link those students with needs that are already in the program and then transition them into kindergarten. Again, the barrier is enrollment right now. And once we can get past that, it's a great program. It's the first time we're going to be able to get dollars directly from the state, not going through any other agency to get to those younger children. So thank you for having this. I know I don't see our director on here, but I know that she's looking forward to the recording, and hopefully
Awesome.
I spoke properly.
Ben, thank you for hopping in. And I'm just curious, like the enrollment, you didn't, when you shared it as an option with families, you didn't see enough families enrolling to sustain an FTE. Is that
So I wish Candace was on. She's going to watch this, and I hope I get this right. I'm crossing my fingers. So our ECAP enrollment happened later than normal. And I think most school districts saw this across. When students are already at home, are they really going to enroll in any sort of preschool or childcare? So our childcare ran pretty much the whole time, even last spring. So to try to fill ECAP, and then on top of that a TK, it would have been way out there. And it doesn't mean we couldn't have tried, but we weren't in a position to do that. We have 24 ECAP slots, so they're all filled and ready to roll. And that's pretty much why we didn't go forward with the transition to kindergarten. We want to.
Some of that could have been like COVID, and just like families not wanting young kids to start if they don't have to, kind of thing. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, thanks for weighing in, Ben. It's great to hear where you're at with this. Cool. So this is just our model. This is, again, pulled from the research that we did a year ago. We really believe that TK classrooms should be staffed with 2 adults. So a lead teacher with a teaching credential and a background in early learning, and a teacher fellow who's in training, who wants to become an early learning certified teacher. This is the way that we build our talent pipeline, actually in all of our classrooms at Impact. So that teacher fellow is working alongside a lead teacher for a year or 2 with really concrete outcomes and coached once a week to then become eventually a lead teacher. And we're working with some partners that provide the alt-cert pathway to do that. But like to your point, I think it was Sandra, but it might have been Angie, I can't remember, about like, let's not poach from our awesome early learning programs that we already have. Like, I think we need to just develop more talent. So really thinking through like, how do you do a 2 teacher in the room model so that you're developing internal talent and not poaching from others. We are capping our class sizes at 24 for TK. And so that's a 12-to-1 student to teacher ratio. This allows for significant opportunities for individualizing the program, but also providing instruction in small groups, both for social emotional learning and academics. Cool. So we had talked about the pre-K programs are strongest when there's excellent curriculum and PD in place. And the PD, while some of it can be similar to the K-5, what K-5 teachers are receiving, it is unique because it's a unique program. I want to share with you the curriculum that we selected because I'm kind of obsessed with it, actually. And I am not affiliated in any way other than we use it. And we did do like a deep dive analysis on different curriculum for TK programs. We're happy to share that analysis with you if you're in, like, for Paul, who's like in the process of designing, if you want to look at our like dashboard that we did, I can share that. We're using Tools of the Mind. It is one of the leading early childhood curriculums. It's unique in that it has thematic-based play units, not unites, but units that blend both social, emotional, and academic readiness. It's super aligned to our TK philosophy, and they provide really strong classroom materials and teacher PD. For the most part at Impact, we create a lot of stuff in-house because we don't feel there's exceptional materials K-5. In this case, Tools of the Mind, we think is exceptional. So we actually use it pretty religiously, or we have seen that we've looked at the positive effects on executive functioning, reasoning, attention, and just like preparing students for math and reading that will come in K. It's been highlighted by the National Institute of Early Education Research, and if you go to their website, you can read all the research behind it. Our team is currently building out like the specifics of each lesson plan for Tools of the Mind in preparation to launch it in the fall. We're also happy to, if you end up going with Tools of the Mind, to share all of that work with you. There's no reason why we each need to do it alone. So what I'd love for you to do is for the next 2.5 minutes, please go to toolsofthemind.org. Just on your own, go on mute if you're not right now, and watch the video that's at the top. Our principal, Lauren Ellis, is actually quoted right underneath it. She is quite the pro in this curriculum. But just go ahead and watch the video. It's 2.5 minutes, and then I'll meet you back here. Awesome. I saw many smiles. Nothing like seeing 4-year-olds on a screen to make your afternoon. Carolyn, did you have something you'd like to share?
Yes, I'd like to say that is really harmonious with, well, an early Head Start. We are funded on a 5-year cycle at this point. And our last 5-year cycle, we spent a lot of time with our parents talking about what it was that school readiness was really all about. And there was a lot about persistence, curiosity, joint attention, being a part of a learning community, feeling competent. And the parents were concerned about their kids going into a kindergarten classroom that they perceived to be reading, writing, arithmetic, sitting in chairs, and not play oriented, and so that just what you showed is very harmonious, at least with what the parents in our program were talking about, what they wished that their kids moved into. And it may very well be that, Angie, I haven't been in their program in a while, but the last time I was there, they had a lot of beautiful aspects of that as well. It's pretty compelling.
Cool. Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's awesome to hear. There seems to be some vision alignment. I have been working with the OSPI team that's leading the TK charge, and did do some conversations with them about like just curriculum selection. And they're also fans of Tools of the Mind. So I do think, it's rare to find a curriculum that lots of people are excited about, but this one is a really good one. So I, again, happy to share others that we looked at, but highly recommend this.
I'd just like to say I totally echo what Carolyn and you are saying about the Tools of the Mind. We've looked at it, and although our early learning programs use creative curriculum, it's very similar, especially with the executive functioning piece. But I think for the purpose of observational assessment in kindergarten and in TK, which WaKids is required for TK as well as kindergarten, that just really builds a strong foundation for the teacher to be able to really catch learning in progress. And I think it's so important for the validity of the data that they're gathering for WaKids to have that play-based piece not be forgotten.
Thank you, Sandra. So this is a dense slide. Sorry, Kevin, I didn't have time to modify this from your feedback from the morning session, but I will. It's a dense slide, and I can follow up with this deck for anyone who's interested. But this does lay out the model that we've built for TK that incorporates Tools of the Mind and aligns Tools of the Mind to our academic K-5 model so that it feels like a fluid experience for students. There is play planning built in daily. There's play built in as a key form of learning. There's SEL morning meeting and sharing of what we call the news, math games and counting collections, a series of intentionally designed read alouds. We have modified many of those to align with our Brave Solidarity core value at Impact. Because we have such a diverse student population, we select books that really empower the communities that we serve, showing like leaders of color in positions of power and whatnot. So happy to share our like revised book list with you if that's of interest. Emergent storybook and buddy reading is a portion of the agenda each day, which is frankly, just can't wait to see that in action. In the professional development that we're doing to prepare teachers, it's just totally adorable. And every scholar will be involved in enrichment activities. These are the different model components broken down in just a different visual way. There's opening group each day, small groups, read alouds, again, intentionally designed, and writing. The writing begins with just simple strokes and eventually begins to form into letters and numbers that are shared in circle. These are all packaged around thematic learning units. There's 8 learning units that scholars will participate in each year. family, grocery store, restaurant, medical, pet, vet, community helpers, and camping. So they're sort of relevant to the student age group. Each of the units expose scholars to new vocabulary and the connection to the existing worlds, and math and literacy components are infused throughout and always introduced with the theme, so not in isolation, but introduced within the content that's shared. Each of the activities promote at least 2 parts of executive functioning, so working memory, problem solving, or self-regulation. So any questions about, before we move on, like just curriculum and sort of our approach to designing the ed model? So now that we've built this structure, we are, like I said, spending the year building full day lesson plans for teachers so that they have everything that they need to be fully prepared. If you end up going with Tools of the Mind and are interested in a more diverse read aloud set, please reach out and we can just share those with you. Maybe save your team some work. We just ask that you use them, make them better, and send them back to us. Cool. So one thing that we have gotten a lot of questions about is just what is our approach to promotion? So since TK is a program of K, there are a lot of questions that come up just internally with our board of directors and even with families. Like, does that mean that they go to first grade after TK, or like what happens? This is what we've built as our promotion approach. TK is intended to be a 1-year program to support K readiness through play, deep social emotional learning work, and pre-literacy and pre-math skills. It is does not take the place of K. We, at the end of TK, the majority of our scholars will continue to K. And we'll be ready for a more academically rigorous K experience than they would have been had they not done TK. Because again, TK is intended for students who are not on track to succeed in kindergarten. We track growth on Tools of the Mind trajectories and the WA Kids Continuum, which was already mentioned is required in TK and K, which is a good thing because it's a helpful tool. At the end of TK, it may be apparent that some scholars have advanced significantly. This is always the case, that a child advances faster than we had planned for. And in that case, that's amazing, and we wouldn't want to ever hold them back. If scholars meeting the end of K Common Core benchmarks, as measured by the K counting inventory, which we're happy to share with you if you don't have it, we use Fontes and Pinnell for measuring literacy, and then our social emotional learning readiness tools. If a scholar has shown that they actually are beyond K, we would certainly work with their families to engage in conversation about moving that scholar to first grade. However, we anticipate that will be a very small percentage of our TK scholars. So I'm curious, like, does this line up with how you're thinking about it, Paul, or others?
So this is a stressor of my kindergarten teacher right now, that we'd have several kids who decide they want to skip K after doing this. So I'm glad to see that F&P's assessment is something you're looking at. I just pulled it up as you were speaking. This sounds great to me. It certainly lines up. It's exactly what I would have said, which is why I took a picture with my phone on the slide.
Yeah, it seems to be like the hot question from parents, but also from the K teachers, like, wait, what? They're not going to have like K? But it's like, no, this is like intended to be in addition to prep for K. Yeah. Cool. And then this is just a breakdown. Paul, this is probably most relevant for you. Happy to send this deck if it's useful after, but this is just like a detailed approach for how we're breaking down specifically literacy, preparation, math, and SEL. And these are, these benchmarks, specific benchmarks are what are driving the design of our program. So since we don't have Common Core skills for a TK program, these are the ones that we're using to help prepare students to be on track for K readiness. They're built from what Tools of the Mind call the trajectories. So the Tools of the Mind curriculum, one of the great things about it is that it's not just curriculum, it's also assessment, but assessment done in an age appropriate way. So like the Walk Kids assessment, they use trajectories. And you get a real sense from mostly observational how a child is progressing. This is an example of the trajectory for concepts of print. This is a trajectory for emotional regulation. I actually just pulled this out with my own child the other day because I was curious about where she was falling in her development as I'm homeschooling her here during this time. And then number concepts. So these are just a sample, but I do think that the inclusion of these trajectories lines up with our philosophy about students entering in very different places, and our job as educators supporting 4-year-olds is to meet them where they're at and help them grow. Any questions about the trajectories or thoughts on alignment or lack of alignment?
I would just ask too, is this somewhat aligned to the Walk Kids, the objectives and the trajectory? Because now you probably know this too, that Walk Kids or TSG assessment can go up to 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. We did like a very fast crosswalk when we were researching Tools of the Mind with Walk Kids, and like I literally did it, but I don't have the background like Abby Sedano does in early learning. We're in the process of doing like a much tighter crosswalk. I would say what we're finding is that the Tools of the Mind curriculum is a bit more rigorous. The standards are a bit higher than Walk Kids.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then we have had just like a lot of thought go into intentional classroom spaces. So we are thinking a lot about, like Paul said, you mentioned like just space is a challenge. So like how do we set up a TK program so that it feels age appropriate and isn't just, in a back closet or in a portable, but is really feels joyful and aligned with the play-based curriculum. So we are did some work before COVID-19 to like align it with COVID-19, but obviously this is not, we're not in person at this moment, and our TK program's launching in the fall, but we have really put time into thinking about how to set it up visually so it's beautiful, calm, and inviting. I didn't include them here because they're specific to our program, but I'm happy to share. We have like a floor plan of what that classroom will look like. We have the classrooms will be literature rich with lots of hands-on texts and thematic units of study. The materials for each thematic unit will be available to promote both fine and gross motor skills. And they'll be stocked with like sensory materials. They'll be highly organized so that students can access learning materials independently. They will look different from our K classes because the curriculum is different. So just want to reiterate that just like the PD for teachers, the actual physical classroom space is also, there needs to be like an intentional design around that. Yeah, so I was going to have you guys move into breakout rooms, but since we're kind of a small crew, I'm just curious, we could just open it up to, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute. What were some of the major takeaways from this session? What's a question you're pondering, and what's a concrete thing you might bring back to your school or district? We'll start with the major takeaways.
For me, I would just say, the concentration on the ecosystem, and I love how you set that as a foundational piece, and then, drilling down to the more detailed pieces of, curriculum and assessment and environment, and how it aligns very nicely with, and as Carolyn said, is harmonious with what early childhood philosophy and practices are. So I would just, really think or want to express that that's that's very enlightening and helpful for us as we move forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. Paul, what about you? Any new questions or thoughts?
I chew on things mentally very slowly. So no, I appreciate what you presented. I need to spend some time the next few days thinking through it. I think what is important for us in public education in particular, right, K-12s, is that this is not a cash cow that we're going to get into because we're going to get rich. It's not the right way to approach it. We're viewing this as an opportunity to enhance the delivery of instruction to our kids. That's what we're after. And the fact that we can take some of the financial burden off of our community in so doing is also beneficial to us. So, no, I just appreciate your insight. I got an email drafted to tell you that I'm going to hassle you in the future now that I know that you're next. Thank you.
I love it. I was going to give you guys my email. It's Jay Wickens. I'll just put it in chat, but Jay Wickens at impactps.org. So would love to continue the conversation with you all.